I saw in this vision sporting events canceled in colleges, universities. Not because they got together and said, let's cancel it. There was just no interest. Nobody would go. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen across the board and there'll never be any more football games. I'm saying that in some of these moves of God for a season, it was so intense and so radical, and the whole campus was so swept up in it, no one would go to the gymnasium and watch the ball game. They didn't want to leave the presence. That's a great awakening. See? Because what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about a nice little renewal. I may have experienced some renewal, and I have. And you know, waves of anointing and change where God is doing certain things. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when a great awakening sweeps through a nation, a city, to where work schedules are interrupted and business leaders walk away from the job for days at a time and just say, I just want to pray. And people fast lunch, not because they want to call a fast, because they'd rather go to the prayer meeting than eat lunch. And mayors get saved, and council members get saved, and presidents get saved, and school officials get saved, and laws get changed, and judges get changed, and jails are empty, and the judges have nothing to do because such a move of God has swept through that. Did you know that happened in the Welsh revival? And finally, the sheriffs and the sheriff deputies there on that island had nothing to do, so they became the choir. And the sheriffs and the deputy sheriffs would travel to the revival meetings and sing because they didn't have any crime to take care of. I don't know if you knew that. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I'm talking about something nobody here has ever seen. Let me say that again. Unless you're 80 or 90 or 100. I'm talking about something that I don't think, unless some of you from other nations, there's been one or two places around the world in the last few years this has happened, but if you haven't been there, I'm talking about something none of us have even seen. I'm talking about such a presence of the Spirit of God that begins to hover over a community, that it'll be like the Welsh revival. One man's testimony was he was a drunk. He was a very mean, vile, angry person. He was known to everyone. His testimony was, I ran to every part of that island that I could go to try to get away from this presence. And he said, finally, there was no part of Wales that I could go to where I did not feel this presence. So what did he finally do? He said, I finally gave up and yielded to it and became one of them. Born again, completely, radically saved, delivered, transformed in a moment of time. And his testimony was, it was so predominant and there was such a hovering presence of God, I couldn't get away from it. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like in the book of Acts where they said, these people that have turned their world upside down. I'm talking about something so strong that those who hated them were afraid to join themselves to them in a phony way. They either joined them or they were afraid of them because the power was that strong. I'm talking about a time when, in the book of Acts, when kings would dare to defy what God was doing, and they would drop dead on their balcony, and they would come and try to and haul them away. I'm talking about times when Christians who were hypocrites would lie in the presence of God and drop dead, and they would carry them out of the room. I'm talking about something that's pretty awesome and pretty fearful and pretty amazing and something none of us have ever really seen. And I kept describing this. And I kept saying, this is fearful. God, he is so intense. He's not going to be stopped. He's coming to a generation that he loves. And nothing is going to stop him. He is coming. He is coming. He is coming. Finally, there were about 300 young people in the room that night. Stage was a little lower than this, probably about a foot lower than this, with 2 or 3 steps up to it. And finally, and I didn't even know what was going to happen, but about 200 to 300 young people in the room. They couldn't stand it any longer. They began to run to the front of the room, and they literally started diving and sliding up to the altar. And the next thing you know, they were crying out to God for this awakening to come to their generation. And they began to beat on the platform. It's a wooden platform, plywood. The sound was just, boom, boom. And they were just beating and crying out to God till finally I couldn't talk anymore, because all you could hear was the roar of the cry and the pounding of the stage with this generation saying, would you come and visit my generation?